Welcome to the deep dive.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're taking a deep dive today into a really, really essential document.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for anyone starting out as a permanent resident here in the United States.
And the source we're digging into is the official USCIS guide, Welcome to the United States, a guide for new immigrants.
Exactly. Think of it sort of as the government's own roadmap for this big step you're taking.
Right. And our mission today, well, it's to help you navigate that map. We want to pull out the most important bits of knowledge.
Not just a list of facts, though.
No, the practical steps,
Sure.
understanding your rights, your responsibilities, and, getting some key insights into American society as you settle in.
And what's really fascinating about this guide is just how much it covers. It's pretty comprehensive.
It really is.
I mean, it's not just find a house, get a social security number. It goes all the way to understanding the U.S. government, even like emergency preparedness.
So yeah, we'll touch on finding work, figuring out education, healthcare options, managing money, staying safe, and even the history and structure of the government, right? Like what it means to be involved later on, maybe as a citizen.
Exactly. And here's something I found really interesting. The guide doesn't just say what to do. It often points you to resources, actual places you can get help, and explains why things are important.
Like understanding the laws or, how to avoid scams and fraud, that kind of thing.
Which is critical. So this deep dive, we hope, will help you cut through all that information and focus on what you really need as you build your new life here.
So where do we start? What does this mean for you right now, settling in?
Let's start right at the beginning, the absolute, immediate, practical things.
Right. The guide kicks off with the real essentials, things you'll need immediately. First off, getting your social security number.
Okay. Why is that number so fundamental?
Well, it's used for a ton of official stuff. The government uses it to track your earnings, figure out benefits later on. But it's also just widely used for ID, opening a bank account, school enrollment, jobs, even renting or buying a place. It's really a key.
A key to accessing services, basically.
Pretty much. Participating officially in the economy.
Okay, so SSN, step one. What about finding a place to live? That feels like maybe one of the biggest early hurdles.
Oh, it definitely can be. A huge step. The guide points out housing is usually a major expense. They estimate, around 25% of income?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And it lists different ways to find places, the usual stuff for rent signs, asking around.
Old school methods.
Yeah, but also online resources, real estate agents, the whole range.
Okay. And once you find a potential place, what's the process like, especially for renting?
So the guide explains that renting usually means signing a lease.
That's the contract, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A legal document, usually for a year, spelling out the rent, when it's due, rules about the property, all that. It does mention you might need a cosigner.
If you don't have income history here yet or credit.
Right. A cosigner is just someone who agrees to create if you can't. It gives the landlord some security.
Okay.
The guide also really advises you to inspect the property carefully before you move in and understand your rights and what the landlord is supposed to do, repairs, keeping it safe.
Does it say what to do if the landlord isn't doing their part?
It does. It suggests steps.
Yeah.
Write a formal letter first, maybe contact a local housing office, and then if things really don't improve, understand your legal options. But always start with trying to communicate.
That's good practical advice. And it also brings up a really important right. Protection against housing discrimination.
Absolutely vital. The guide is super clear. It's illegal for a landlord to refuse you based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, or family status.
And if you think that's happened?
It points you to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development HUD. That's the agency to contact. Just knowing that resource exists is huge.
Definitely empowering. Okay, so basics like housing are getting sorted, finding work is often the next big thing, right?
Yeah, top priority for many. The guide suggests looking lots of places. Check job postings at businesses, use community agencies, some specifically help immigrants.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, also local employment services, online job boards, newspapers. It covers the typical process too. You'll likely need a written application and a resume.
And explain what a resume is, quickly.
Sure. It's basically your professional summary.
Yeah.
Your work history, education, skills, contact info. The guide mentions community service agencies can often help you put one together for free.
That's a great tip. And the guide also warns about job scams.
Yes, definitely. It warns about companies charging big fees for promises of jobs or maybe misrepresenting what they do. Just a reminder to be cautious. if it sounds too good to be true.
Right, or asks for money up front without a guarantee.
Exactly. Be wary.
Okay, so beyond just finding the job, what about once you're hired? Benefits? Worker rights?
It mentions common benefits, medical, dental, life insurance, but notes, not all employers offer these.
Yep.
More importantly, it details your rights as a worker. You're protected against discrimination in employment. Similar categories as housing, race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, or genetic information.
And there's an agency for that, too.
Yes. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, they enforce those protections.
So if you feel you were treated unfairly at work, or maybe not hired for one of those reasons, you contact the EEOC.
Exactly. They investigate those kinds of complaints. The guide also mentions the paperwork you'll handle when you start. Employers have to verify you can legally work here using Form I-9.
Okay.
And you'll fill out a Form W-4, which tells your employer how much income tax to take out of your pay.
And it mentions something called self-check.
Yeah, a free online tool from the government. You can use it yourself just to confirm your own work eligibility status, kind of for peace of mind.
That's handy.
It also makes a specific point about needing to speak English at work.
If
an employer requires it, they have to show it's actually necessary for the job itself, and they need to tell you about that requirement before hiring you.
Otherwise,
the guide suggests it could potentially be seen as illegal discrimination.
Which really underlines why learning English is so helpful for opportunities here. And the guide points out classes are often available locally, affordably too.
Right. Moving beyond work and housing. The guide gets into other essential daily life things, like childcare if you have young kids.
And it makes a key point. It's against the law to leave young children home alone unsupervised.
Correct. It mentions options for care, like family childcare homes, often in someone's house, or bigger childcare centers.
Any help for lower-income families?
Yes. It mentions federal programs like Head Start that provides broader services, including early education, for eligible low-income families.
Okay. Another practical thing, getting around. Transportation.
It acknowledges that lots of cities have public transport buses, trains, subways, often the affordable way to go. Taxis exist, but usually cost more.
But let's be honest, in many parts of the U.S., a car feels almost necessary.
That's very true. And the guide covers getting a driver's license. It notes you get this from your state's agency, often called the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles.
And it's not just for driving, right?
No, it's a very common form of ID, too, widely accepted.
And it gives some driving safety tips, like basic rules of the road.
Yeah, about 10 practical tips. Always drive on the right side, wear seatbelts, follow traffic laws, absolutely never drive under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Basic but crucial stuff.
Good reminders. It also mentioned hitchhiking.
Yeah, just a note of caution that it's not common here and often illegal because of safety concerns. Best to avoid it.
Okay. Managing your money. Clearly fundamental. What's the emphasis there?
It introduces bank accounts, checking for daily spending, savings for, saving, and credit unions. Explains they're safe places for your money. Much safer than keeping lots of cash at home.
Good point. And debit cards.
Yes. Explains they link right to your checking account. You spend money you already have. It also mentions cashier's checks, certified checks, ways to make guaranteed payments.
Any safety advice with banking?
Definitely. Keep your account and card numbers safe, separate. Report lost or stolen cards to the bank immediately. Standard stuff, but important.
It also covers credit cards, explaining they work differently. You pay later.
Right, but if you don't pay the whole balance each month, you get charged interest. Basically, borrowing money costs you money. Same safety advice applies. Don't give out the number carelessly.
Now, a big responsibility. Taxes.
Vital section. The guide explains you'll pay federal, state, and sometimes local income taxes, plus Social Security and Medicare taxes.
And why do we pay these? What's the rationale given?
It explains taxes fund the government services we all benefit from. Public safety, schools, roads, healthcare help, disaster relief. It's how you contribute to the society you're now part of.
Makes sense. And linked to finances avoiding identity theft.
Absolutely critical. The guide really stresses protecting your personal info, especially your Social Security number and bank details. It even advises not carrying your Social Security card with you every day.
Because that's the main target for thieves.
Exactly. Your SSN is gold to identity thieves.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Moving from the immediate practical stuff to longer-term things like integration, well-being. Education is a big section in the guide.
It is. It highlights that free public education, K through 12, is available for all children, usually ages 5 to 16, and attendance is generally required by law.
Compulsory education. How does a parent get their child enrolled?
The advice is to contact the local school district. You'll usually need some documents, medical records, immunization proof you live in that district.
What if the child doesn't speak English well yet?
That's a key point they address. The school district is supposed to evaluate the child's English skills and then provide services to help them learn English and participate fully.
That's good.
And importantly, schools are required to communicate with parents in a language they can understand.
That must be a huge relief for many parents. It also mentions school safety.
Yes, it says generally public schools are safe. It does acknowledge bullying can happen and points towards resources for dealing with that.
And beyond K-12, higher education.
It mentions community colleges and universities, both public and private. Public ones are often cheaper, especially if you're a state resident.
Community colleges can be a good starting point.
Yeah, great pathway, more affordable, can lead to a 4-year degree, or offer specific job training.
What about adult education? For adults wanting to learn new skills or maybe just continue learning?
Absolutely covered. Options for general interest classes, job skills training, and crucially, English language learning, ESL or ESOL.
Are those classes accessible?
Often, yes. Frequently offered through public schools or community colleges at low cost, sometimes even free.
That's great. Now, healthcare, another major area and often very different from other countries.
It really is. The guide emphasizes that medical care here is mostly paid for through health insurance.
Usually from an employer.
Often, yes. But if not, you generally need to buy it yourself. And getting it quickly is important because medical bills can be incredibly high.
How does insurance generally work, according to the guide?
It explains that if you have insurance, the company pays some or all of your medical bills. You might still pay a small amount yourself each time a co-payment.
And without insurance?
You could be responsible for the whole cost, which, again, can be astronomical. However, it does note that government programs like Medicaid or CHIP might be available for eligible low-income folks or families.
What about emergencies? If you need urgent care but don't have insurance or money right then?
Okay, this is important. The guide states that emergency rooms must treat urgent medical conditions regardless of your ability to pay at that moment.
But you'll get a bill later.
Almost certainly, yes. You'll be billed for those services. For things that aren't emergencies, or for potentially more affordable care, it points to clinics or community health centers. They often offer low-cost care.
The guide also lists some other federal benefit programs?
Yes, briefly. Things like SNFP for food help, assistance for domestic violence survivors, TANF temporary assistance for needy families, and help for immigrants with disabilities. Eligibility depends on status, time in the U.S., income. Worth looking into if needed.
And it mentioned one-stop career centers again.
Yeah, as a resource that might offer training, counseling, job listings, maybe even integrated ESL and job skills training. Kind of a hub.
Let's talk about safety. Always a big concern in a new environment. The guide has a pretty significant section on this, right? Including emergency prep.
It does. Key preparedness tips. Practical stuff.
Like what?
Like knowing where the nearest police, fire stations, hospitals are. Knowing how to shut off utilities in your home. It really recommends having a disaster kit ready.
With essentials.
Yeah, water, food, medication's enough for at least 3 days.
And making plans with your family seems crucial.
Definitely. Practice escape routes from home. Have meeting spots outside. Check your kids' school emergency plans. Make sure they know contact info and what to do.
Getting to know neighbors helps too.
Yeah, and maybe participating in community safety programs like Neighborhood Watch, all mentioned as ways to boost safety.
The guide also touches on broader safety alerts like terrorism threats.
Briefly, yes. It explains the NTAS system for threat info and encourages using the see something, say something idea, report suspicious activity you see.
And one of the most critical safety points, when and how to use 911.
Absolutely vital. The guide is crystal clear. Only call 911 for serious, life-threatening emergencies.
Meaning?
Reporting a fire, a crime that's happening right now, or needing immediate emergency medical help. It explicitly says don't call 911 for non-emergencies. Don't call for directions or just general questions.
That distinction is so important for someone new here. What if you get stopped by the police? Any advice?
Yeah, calm, practical advice. Don't be afraid. Be polite. Cooperate. Tell the officer if you don't speak English. If you're in a car, stay inside. Hands visible on the wheel unless told otherwise. Cooperation and clear communication are key. Use an interpreter if needed.
Good advice. It also points to resources for natural disasters.
Yes, like hurricanes, floods. Mentions disasterassistance.gov or the FEMA hotline for help.
Okay, finally, the guide sort of zooms out. It looks at the bigger picture, learning about the United States itself.
Right. Explains the core idea. It's a representative democracy. The government's power comes from the people.
The famous government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Exactly that. It gives a quick history overview. 13 colonies wanting independence, the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776.
Independence Day.
Right? And the Revolutionary War led by George Washington that won that freedom.
And then the country grew, formed a federal government, now 50 states, D.C. territories. The flag reflects that 13 stripes, 50 stars.
It introduces the U.S. Constitution as the supreme law, establishes the idea that everyone's equal unto the law. It calls it a living document.
Meaning it can change.
Yes, through amendments.
Yeah.
And the first 10 amendments, that's the Bill of Rights.
Why is the Bill of Rights so important for someone listening?
Because this directly impacts your life here. It lists fundamental freedoms and protections. Freedom of speech, religion, press, peaceful assembly.
And rights, if you're accused of a crime.
Yes, important legal rights, too. Understanding these is really essential for living here.
The Constitution also set up the government structure, 3 branches.
Right, the system of checks and balances. Designed so no single part gets too powerful. You've got the legislative branch, that's Congress, House and Senate. Their main job is making laws.
Okay, branch 1 makes laws. Then the executive branch.
Led by the president. Their role is to carry out or enforce the laws Congress makes.
Makes laws, enforces laws, 3rd branch.
The judicial branch, Supreme Court, federal courts. They'd interpret the laws, make sure they follow the Constitution.
And how do people, residents, potential citizens, interact with all this?
Well, the guide notes citizens vote for leaders in the legislative and executive branches. And as a resident, you have the right to contact your elected officials in Congress, share your views, ask for help.
It also mentions state and local governments.
Yeah, briefly. They handle lots of daily services, schools, libraries, local police, utilities, and local government meetings are often open to the public. You can attend.
It even suggests getting out and seeing the country national parks, historic sites.
Nice touch. And finally, for those looking even further ahead, it touches on becoming a U.S. citizen. Naturalization.
What are the main requirements it mentions?
Key things like continuous residence as a permanent resident for a certain time.
How long is that usually?
Generally 5 years. Or 3 if married to a U.S. citizen. Also, physical presence in the U.S., good moral character, and knowing basic English and U.S. history and government. That's the civics part.
So getting permanent residence isn't necessarily the final step.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can be a step towards citizenship, if that's something you choose. The guide mentions possible exceptions for military members and maybe waivers for the English and civics tests, depending on age and time as a resident. Gives you that look ahead.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot in this deep dive. Pretty much walked through that whole Welcome to the United States guide.
Yeah, from those first practical steps, getting the SSN, finding housing, to understanding your rights and responsibilities, like obeying laws, paying taxes.
We also explored crucial parts of life here. Education for kids and adults, navigating healthcare, managing money.
And really important safety tips. Home, family, emergencies, how and when to use 911 correctly.
And connecting it all back to the bigger picture. The guide gives that foundation on the U.S. government, the history, the idea of we the people.
Meaning the power originates with the people.
Exactly. And how the federal government works with those 3 branches.
And like we just discussed, it also points towards what might come next. Beyond permanent residency, the path to citizenship, naturalization requirement.
Yeah. So just to recap, this deep dive aimed to distill the key info from that official USCIS guide, Welcome to the United States, a guide for new immigrants.
Right. And while we hit the highlights, for the absolute most specific, detailed, up-to-the-minute information for your situation, you really should go to the official sources.
Definitely. Websites like www.usis.gov, www.usa.gov, those are essential. And the specific phone numbers in the guide for agencies like HUD for housing.
The EEOC for work rights, or the National Domestic Violence Hotline if you or someone needs that specific help. Always go to the source for specifics.
We really hope this deep dive gave you a clear overview, maybe made things feel a bit less overwhelming, and pointed you towards the resources you need.
Hopefully empowered you to take those next crucial steps with more confidence.
And finally, just a thought to leave you with. The guide talks about exciting opportunities, about the role residents and citizens play in shaping the country. So beyond just settling in, following the rules, what does it mean to you to actively participate, to connect, to really become part of the fabric of this new home? Something to think about.